Hello, my name is Connor Parmenter. This is my final project for History 460 with Dr. Schen. This is my project on Little Valley of Cattaraugus County of New York, the eastern frontier. So, a little bit of background history for you. About 10,000 years ago, the area was actually covered in about 100 foot of glacial ice, and this is actually the reason why we have the Allegheny Plateau today, is that a lot of the ice, when it was melting, it took a lot of land with it, so that's pretty interesting. So originally the area was home to the Erie indigenous group and possibly the Wenro too, and actually there is a three-tiered mound about 5 minutes from Little Valley that is dated to around 800 AD, the builders being unknown. So unless it was a predecessor of the Erie, but in the 1800s, the American ideas and perspectives about what that might be got a little fanciful. So we'll take a look at that later. So by the time of the Revolution, the Seneca had pushed their way into the area, though, and this actually came with the cost of them siding with Britain during the Revolutionary War, and we invading the area. And actually, General Washington sent his inferior Broadhead down there on a mission of total war to burn down all the Seneca villages and farms that he finds. So, also, the area of Little Valley was known as Little Forest by the Seneca, as well as Cattaraugus, meaning bad-smelling banks from the natural gas leaks. So, 1794 and 1812, following the Revolution, the white settlers established a failed settlement in the area, and about 1807 is when it actually started. Though it was an official American territory, they had to abandon it after the War of 1812, after the initial British burning of Buffalo, and then their subsequent removal down south. They decided, we'll wait until the war ends. So that's what they did. The area was previously known as Slabtown to Americans due to the presence of Rock City, which I don't know how they found that, of all things, but became known as Perry in honor of Captain Oliver Hazard Perry, hero of the Battle of Lake Erie in 1813. So, and that is from whence? Here you can see a zoomed in picture on Little Valley right at the apex of the Allegheny. So that is actually where the town of Little Valley incorporated and split off was from Perry in 1818. Though the town records from 1818 to 1823 are lost or destroyed, I cannot find any information about that at all. The towns of Conewago, Napoli, Mansfield, New Albion, and Bucktooth, later renamed Salamanca, were all formed from Little Valley. And as we can see in the early population of the town, it was struggling for a little bit, but by the time around 1850, that is when, see a little after, but in the 1850s is when the railroad actually moved in, and that was the biggest boost for the population. So. The population has been relatively stable since 1850. I believe the population today is around 1,600 for the township, and then I think the maximum was 1,900 in 1910. So we fell off a little bit, guys. So my main primary source for this was actually a history of the town written by the founders of the town in 1840, only 22 years after they had written, or they had, established it at first. So I just thought that that was pretty interesting that they were detailing themselves. And you know, when you're making a history of your own settlement, I think you're gonna, mythologize a little bit, kind of over exaggerate sometimes. So I'm just presenting this perspective by Kamen, which is a academic scholar we read in class, that comments about the local histories written in the U.S. They say local history is sometimes clouded in myth colored by forms of ancestor worship, are confused with patriotism or boosterism. They're often written to promote local or national heroes, and certainly every important figure that passed through the area is given its due. So just keep that in mind when you're going through this next part. That may not be 100% accurate, but broad strokes. So, a couple more disclaimers. There's no inclusion of any non-white male settler voices. Myth-making of original settlers was bordering the superhuman. Primary importance given to local businessmen and entrepreneurs as the startups of the town, and it was portrayed as a direct upward progress rather than a civilizational switch of land use, which is like a indigenous way of looking at it. And yeah, the founders were all still alive during the writing, and many of them were still in public office too. So you would want whatever's being written about you to be good, especially if these are important people that you're writing about. You see? So, the Pioneers of Cattaraugus County, 1857 view of the founding. This is my main primary source. About 95% of the information is pretty positive. It just portrays the eminent citizens of the county's history and gave a census record. So actually it is for the county, forgive me, not just the town of Little Valley, but the people I included were fundamentally important for Little Valley, and they had a whole separate history just for each town within the county. So, and just to read this real quick, who have performed the settlers' duties and defended settlers' rights and exercised high public trusts confided to them by the people of Cattaraugus with ability, integrity, and patriotism. This humble tribute is respectfully inscribed. That is like the second page on it, which I think is pretty cool. So, let's take a look in here. So, the fourth town organized in the county was erected from Perrysburg in April 10, 1818 and 1855. It contained 801 inhabitants, with 160 natives and 18 naturalized voters. Now, when it does this inhabitant count, it does not count women and children. I discovered this because I read that, and I had the previous statistic of what the population was in 1850, and it was quite a bit larger than 801 inhabitants. So I went to the official U.S. government census records and went back to 1850, and I discovered that there was, in fact, 1,300 residents there. So I don't know if they're not counting the women and children, but according to the census records by the government, it seems like they weren't counting women and children as inhabitants, which just seems odd. I don't know. Maybe it was just different cultural views back then. They had 370 cows in the town, which produced 39,000 pounds of butter and 16,000 pounds of cheese, containing 19,000 acres of land at the assessed value of $215,000. Taxes paid in 1856 is $1,900. That's pretty good. So, and then we just have some local advertisements, dealers in dry goods, ready-made clothing, dealers in watches, clocks, jewelry, guns, pistols, dealer in chairs. This also has interesting sections on the Allegheny, which the Little Valley served as a natural gateway into the Allegheny for people heading westward. It affords a great natural highway for the convening lumber to the southern and western markets from Cattaraugus and the adjoining regions of Pennsylvania. It passes through Portville, Olean, Allegheny, Carrollton, Great Valley, Bucktooth, and there. And then it also has a word about the railroad too, which is like brand new in this moment. This great highway, which has raised the real estate in this county since its completion fully 100%, and brought a cash market to the farmers' doors, passes through and then Little Valley. So, very interesting. And going to Olean, which is the only big town in the area then and still. And also in the first couple pages of this book, I thought this was interesting. They were just bragging about how they were able to domesticate the American elk, which is no longer native to the area because they've been driven out. So very interesting. A lot of things have changed over the years. So let's take a look at one pioneer in specific, Benjamin Chamberlain. He was born at the end of the Revolution in Maine. His father moved to Allegheny County when he was 10. At 16, without money or clothes except those on his back and barefooted, he went to Olean to seek work in a sawmill. Now, remember when I said about the mythologizing aspects of this? And let me grab one quote just to read for you. So, this is also from Judge Chamberlain's description. It says, at the time, the whole of western New York was little better than a wilderness, and the rewards of industry and enterprise here were only to be reached through the scenes of toil and trials and privations that often tried the sternest energies of those who possessed the courage to encounter them. The family of Judge Chamberlain were in humble life. Their lot was cast amongst millions whose fate it was to toil, endure, and suffer, and to win their way to such positions of prosperity or distinction as it may be their fortune to attain, unaided and alone. So, this guy is really going for it. He's really making the American dream, essentially. I'll continue on the slide. As he increased in years and grew in strength, his intellect expanded and his power enlarged until the position of labor in a sawmill at wages by the month could no longer satisfy his ambition or afford a sufficient field for his energies and for his business, and he began to look abroad for a wider avenue to usefulness and success. And then after that initial sawmill business that he started burnt down, a less hopeful and determined man would have yielded to a misfortune so overwhelming, but not Judge Chamberlain. The wife is never mentioned by name, but she is said to be, quote, no less remarkable in her own sphere as he is to his, quote, and, quote, to her should be given a large share of the credit for the achievements of her husband. If only we knew who that was that should be given the credit. It was not mentioned within the document. There might be some census records you could look up to find the name of it, but I'm not sure about that. But Mr. Chamberlain served as the Cattaraugus County judge with Democratic leanings and the first Cattaraugus County Sheriff's deputy under Israel Curtis. At the time of writing in 1856, he was 66 and president of Cuba Bank, as well as various farming, lumbering, and land dealing companies residing in East Randolph, about 15 minutes from Little Valley. Here's another look at Alson Leavenworth. So born and educated in Connecticut at the time of the late Revolution, he went to the University of Pennsylvania and was taught medicine by a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Graduated in 1813, became a medic in the Army and after he got out of the Army, after the War of 1812, he traveled by covered wagon to Batavia and then to Ellicottville. And in the midst of the description about his journey over here, the author stopped to say, reader, think of that journey of 4 weeks with ox teams that could now be performed in 16 hours. Just to show you the level of infrastructural improvement that has occurred within this short period of time. Quote, meeting occasionally with persons who had settled there and their representations of the healthfulness of the climate, its unsurpassed, pure spring water, the good quality of soil, and the great quality of fine timber, he decided to go and examine for himself. He traveled through the unbroken wilderness of cold Cattaraugus and actually performed the first amputation in the county on a middle-aged Seneca man's leg. He also served as county judge with Whig leanings. So this also shows you that no matter the political leanings of these founding figures, though they may have been contentious in political realms, they are universally respected for their efforts in their foundational role in the city. So, moving past that, so for Railroads and Riverboats, which is a great song by Jim Croce, New York and Erie Railroad was built in 1851, running through the village, and led to a major growth spurt of the town and spurred new industries. Pre-railroad industries were dairy, cheese, logging, sawmill, gristmill, the kind of things you would expect from a frontier town. And then post-railroad industries started to get more into the value-added side of the economic chain. So started, instead of, dairy, start making creameries and starting adding value to it within the town. And the railroad and the proximity to Allegheny River, as I mentioned before, allowed Little Valley to be a launching point for pioneers headed west. So, during the Civil War years, Cattaraugus County was deemed not large enough to raise its own regiment, so many young volunteers had to walk to Elmira to enlist. These volunteers from Elmira were known as the New York 64th Hardtack Regiment. This wasn't everyone from Little Valley, as the 154th was also mustered in Jamestown and had a couple local boys with him too. But that's quite a bit further. Both of these regiments saw action at some of the most major battles of the war, including Gettysburg, Antietam, Sherman's March. I mean, these are textbook level stuff. Of the 1,065 men who mustered into the 154th, only 1/3 saw the end. And Captain Henry V. Fuller of Little Valley, New York, of the 64th Hardtack Regiment, had to say about possibly being merged, "If we are to be consolidated, let it be with the 154th. We fear that by some move in that direction we shall be joined with the 61st. Better fellows than the 61st never walked on a battlefield, but they are not from old Cattaraugus. If consolidated with them, we should be in danger of losing the glorious 64. And as you can see in that image, that is actually Henry Fuller. I went to school with a couple Fullers. And if you know anything about Little Valley, you know there's some Charlesworths there. There was a man who enlisted in the 64th Hardtack Regiment called Joseph Charlesworth, who actually, during the Battle of Gettysburg, was hit in the head with a cannonball and survived, which is very impressive. Very, very impressive. So, as we come to the end of the century, Little Valley is gaining its prominence in the county. The county seat moved to Little Valley after the railroad dramatically improved the town's chances of taking the seat. The village was officially incorporated from the town in 1876. The famous Little Valley Opera House was built between 1870 and 1888 by the Cattaraugus Cutlery Company. And New York Governor Teddy Roosevelt visited Little Valley at the Cattaraugus County Fair in 1899, orating to 15,000 people with his speech, "This Nation." Now, I can't find this speech anywhere online, but it must have been pretty good, because he'd go on to be president only 2 years later, after both the vice president died of sickness and the president, McKinley, died of assassination in Buffalo. So here we can just see some pictures of Little Valley. Obviously, the most crazy one is right in the front and center. This Fireman's Minstrel show shows you that even though we're up north, we weren't completely innocent. We got a nice picture of looks like 40s or 50s at the Cattaraugus County Fair. Fairgrounds look the exact same. As you can see in the bottom left picture, Japanese gin came to Little Valley in 1898 for the fair. It's just nice pictures. So life in the valley. In the 1890s, the village had several stores, 3 churches, a school, cutlery shop, several hotels, an opera house, a courthouse, and jail, and a lawyer, sawmills and grist mills, cheese box factory, a doctor, Kellogg washing machine company, and a weekly journal, as well as other small shops. So The founder of the Spy, Milan Brown, who came to Little Valley in 1894 that is, had this to say. It had one industry, a cutlery factory, employing 40 men and running 4 days a week. And this little ripple, with the increase of Cattaraugus Cutlery Co.'s payroll, started a wave of prosperity which has been steadily rolling higher. In a few months, both factories enlarged, and with it, our village. It used to be Little Valley near Salamanca. It locates itself now. It is acknowledged as the best town in Cattaraugus County, and our citizens have taken the habit of locating other towns by hours. That's what I'm talking about. We're gonna return it to that place. So as we can see here, a couple looks at Little Valley. As you can see, the top two images are both of the exact same spot. That's like the central square in Little Valley, going down Rock City Street and meeting with Main and Fair Oak. As you can see, a lot of the buildings have changed since then. This bottom middle photograph is actually of modern day Hughes Hotel, which is at the end of Main Street, on the right end Main Street. Actually, you can see it in the top right picture, the very leftmost building. So that is what it looked like in 1895, with wooden plank sidewalks. Incredibly interesting. I think this bottom right photo is a picture from up on like 4th Street, somewhere on the hill looking down at Little Valley. I can't quite make out where it's coming from though, so that might be off. Don't trust that one. So you can see here we have some more pictures of the factory life, and this slide is just the depressing side of living here. Factories, and doesn't look like fun labor, and digging your car out of a ditch sounds like Little Valley. Here we have a couple more pictures from the end of the decade. We actually have the first graduating class from Little Valley, the class of 1899. And fun fact, it wasn't until about it was either 1921 or 1923 when they actually started wearing the full like cap and gowns that we still wear today. As you can see, these guys are especially dapper. And as you can see to the left a little later on, the faculty was having a fashion party where they dressed in the style of the gay 90s. That is, the gay 1890s. I just thought that was so cool. As you can see, they're dressed up like cowboys and just, I don't know, this is very cool. So, how about a couple local legends, huh? So, I mentioned that mound earlier. Some people think that there's giants around. So the legend stemmed from both that mound and a couple of just extra large bones that people have picked up that, I mean, some of them have now been identified as mammoth bones, but there's a couple that are just like extra random bones that are just like whatever, but they just say, well, I guess it's gotta be a giant. As you can see, these reproductions of what the giant supposedly would have looked like were made in the 1850s by C.M. Huntington. He was just a local with a just passion for finding the giants, you know. Gotta respect it. So, other legends? Did Abraham Lincoln really sleep in a local hotel? That's what I know you're all dying to know. So in the late 1850s, on a dark, snowstormy night, a tall man arrived at the Palace Hotel. He was a very strange man, and nobody really knew who he was or where he came from. He was possibly traveling from New York City back home to Springfield, but no one really knows. His blizzard ended up stalling his train, and he sought shelter at either the Palace Hotel or the Rock City or Howe House. Not really sure which one. Levi Godding, who lived across from the hotel, was spellbound by the man as he told stories. When Lincoln left, the snow cleared up the next day, and everyone was left wondering who that mysterious man was who was so eloquent and had so many stories and was so friendly. And it wasn't until a couple of years later, when in 1860, a man, Mr. Godding, looked down at the newspaper and saw the man running for president under the name Abraham Lincoln. And he said, "Gee, that's the guy I met way back then. Wouldn't you know?" And so the story goes. But is it true? Well, there is another version of events where possibly, don't get too mad at me, Low Valley people, possibly none of this happened. And in the 1950s, the owner of the Rock City Hotel was a man named John Lincoln, who jokingly placed a sign outside for, I think, a couple of months, it was quite a while, that said, "Lincoln slept here." So he's playing on it, but, you know, is it chicken or the egg? Because he's put a sign that says Lincoln slept here. Did he put the sign out because people already thought that Lincoln slept there, or is it because he's just pulling a gimmick to try and get these people? I'll let you guys decide for that one. I'll let you decide for yourself. So, some other myths. Murder Hill. It's not its official name, right? It's officially called Fish Hill. So why is it known as Murder Hill? Well, it's had a deadly past. So, Fish Hill, or McCarthy State Hill, or just the big hill in between Little Valley and Ellicottville, if you like to do it simple, was home to, in 1875, Emma Wimple, who, if you're from Little Valley, you'll recognize that last name too, who ended up poisoning her husband with the help of a farmhand, Nelson Cool, who happened to be her lover. And they tried to escape together, but they were caught and imprisoned. But that's not all, because who you're looking at right now is Miss Cynthia Buffum. Now, in 1913, Miss Cynthia Buffum lived on Fish Hill with her husband, her 3 other daughters, and their newborn baby, and also with another farmhand. So, Cynthia Buffum and this farmhand named, Ernest Fram, Cynthia and Ernest Fram began to develop feelings, much like the previous incident on Fish Hill, and Fram convinced Buffum that the only way that they could be together is if she killed her entire family. So she did just that. She poisoned not only her husband and her 3 daughters, but also her newborn baby too, which is just terrible. So as you can see here, just a final comparison shot. This is 6th Street and around 1900, and this is it today. And I actually lived for a short period of time at that White House on the right. So there you go. Thank you.